Hey there everyone, so this will be my final art project, and we'll be looking into the world of aristocrats and artists alike, how they led their daily lives. Now, there could be a couple of questions from the get-go, considering this was a new era with brilliant ideas and new artists alike. So John, let's touch on these topics would be, how did both parties work together? Were some separated at this time? Were they part of the same class? Or were they just doing their own thing? Did they get along? Did they fight behind the scenes? To tell you the truth, a lot that happened during this period. Cultures were being developed, the birth of a new art style that caught the eyes of so many onlookers, looked upon it with grace and power. But before we jump into all of this, we must discuss the context given with all of this history. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. It began with the reign of King Louis. He had a major hand in creating the culture of the aristocrats and artists since, during his reign, he being charged of the monarchy within France itself to build upon the high-class lifestyle culture and to make his dreams for better France reality. Now you could be asking, how would the king go about all of this? How would he make these plans a reality? Well, I'm actually happy that you asked that. He did this by hiring multiple artists to prompt his own propaganda, which is essentially making him look strong, powerful, and compassionate to the fellow man, as well to show his visions of nature as he saw fit. From then on, the view of France at this time period would change drastically, from town to town undergoing major construction, such as one example being the Palace of Versailles, Saint-Germain. Eventually, his reign would come to a close, but he left a major mark on the world of art and agriculture within France, as the public saw the visions he would promote. But after this event, there would be a new wave of artists, with cultural ideas yet to come, and the time period that would be held would represent them as a whole. And that period was called Rococo. To start off, let's define what Rococo even is. It is characterized by lightness, elegance, and the extravagant use of curving natural forms and ornamentation. Now, you can also tell by the major use of soft pastel and oil paint colors that many of the paintings would use to give off such a unique effect of romanticism, freedom, and pleasure like no other before it. As well being seen here today, this is the upper class. This was the main depiction of the upper class for the longest time. Aristocrats and upperclassmen alike would be often seen with many adorning features such as powdered wigs, detailed dresses, well-groomed men with coats, expensive jewelry, and even pets to show off their high-class status. Majority of artists were training under mentor figures to venture on to the art world to see if they could make it on their own. Lifestyle of their own would usually be hectic in a lot of ways, from rigorously training to become the very best version of themselves they could be, to getting to work for the upper class men and women alike to make portraits of their family and scenery of the outdoors. A lot of the population of the artists did eventually have to stray away from the previous Versailles, since the death of King Louis had a huge effect on France's monarchy as a whole. So, they traveled to Paris to make a round of social gatherings with the aristocrats' women, artists, dancers, musicians, alike, to create a gathering known as the Saloon. Now, let's get into the meat and bones of this. One of the major artists during this time period, and what they went by, was the name of Jean-Honoré Fragonard. So, believe it or not, he was actually supposed to start his career as a businessman that was set by the Royal Academy. Each member would decide upon the sets given to other members from the get-go. But, obviously he didn't like the idea of someone forcing them to be on the set path. So he abandoned the conventional pathway for him that was decided by the hierarchy, and would go on to pursue his art as his own passion and career choice. would then on start his training in Paris in the year of 1738, and his family would be accompanying him as well. He would be working under the tutelage and mentorship of Francois Bourgeois. Under his tutelage, he would go on to complete the trips to Rome in 1752. After the many years spent in the academy in Rome, he would experiment with other venues of art, such as red chalk drawings. One of the titles of these pieces were named Ville de l'Istis at de Villot. As well, he would be painting small cabinets for smaller French collectors. Fragonard would eventually be commissioned by somebody unexpected though, but in retrospect it made a lot of sense with his history and work behind it. Madame du Barry, the official mistress of King Louis for the Chateau de la Vicente, would be the one to commission him, since around this time a lot of his works were gaining him the notoriety and skill that was warranted. As we can see before us, this would be considered a fantasy portrait of the Rococo period, with the many soft colors that it shows. The name of the piece is called Marie-Amélie Gonot de Cosson. We can see the queen being dressed up in outfits reminiscent of the time period to show off their wealth, class, and own personal status as a whole. Believe it or not, this has actually worked a couple of times during the production of this piece. It got to the point where they even had to paint during the surface again, when it was still wet during this whole process. But besides all that, we can see it's in its own masterclass of detail. Legitimately, it is very impressive on how they went about it, with the usage of undertones of cooler grays, red, blues, and some hints of green hue added to the dress as well. We can also see the dog in the background as well, to use a hint of tinge, and maybe a lot of white on him as well. During this time, the most popular breeds were considered Congo Spaniels, Pomeranians, Springer Spaniels, and even more. The next piece we'll be looking into is called The Love Letter. This was a piece that was made at the peak of Romanticism, with the many brush strokes and such vibrant colors, with helpings of orange, pink, blue, and tans of white, as well added to the beautiful effects of this painting. She is also accompanied by a scruffy looking dog, most likely her pet at that point, but looking towards the view of the painter. Lastly, her outfit is to be shown with the puffy details of the dress, the color lighting of the blue, the crochet of the many details of her hat, and to top it all off, ribbons of dawn on her head to complete the whole outfit. And now, we'll be looking into another great artist, but they do go by the name of Elizabeth Louise. To give a brief history on them, they started their art career with studying under her mentors, Douane and Davisne, and they were not to be trifled with within the art world. They were known across for their mastery of oil paint and academics. During this time as well, her own family would encourage her to keep pushing and pursuing art, by doing what they could, buying art supplies, giving them encouragement, and gave what they could to provide for their status overall. When she was becoming a young adult, her work was becoming astoundingly well crafted, brought life into the eyes of many onlookers. But like with many things, there is a con to a pro. In this case, her hand and her hard work were to have a very glaring issue. She didn't have any of the proper license to operate under the Artist Guild positions. Unfortunately, her materials were seized once they found out about this, when she was just working in a professional setting, with no proof to be there at the guild in any manner. To make it even more difficult on her, during this time as well, not many women were working in this position, especially in the art world. In a sense, it was mostly a dominant male class at that period. But fortunately enough, she was one of the few to rise up from the ground up and put in the extra work like no other, to prove herself worthy of the academic, to get her position, and she would rightfully and eventually gain the respect that she earned no matter what. Later on, after her efforts, she would be appointed by the Queen Marie Antoinette to act as a personal painter for her. During her time spent in the palace in the late 18th century, She would go on to be commissioned by them to make 30 works in total, only at the age of 20 as well. This was made for the Queen around the year of 1778. She was the most famous for her quote and treatment of the subjects of France. As the saying goes, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. To be honest here, sort of the saying alone showed her own disregard of the people in France during the famine, and her personal interest was top priority. But playing this during making of these portraits and art pieces like. But in any case, this piece itself shows the class and dominance and power. Within the whim of her own words and walk, she could make anyone break in any situation, during her reign as queen. We also see that she is holding herself in the utmost highest regard, from the posture, clothing, choices, and the way she presents and speaks about herself and others. This was a woman that you did not want to cross or trifle with. The artists and upperclassmen alike had some similarities to one another, and some big differences with each other. Taking a deeper dive into all this, we witness how they would be treated on both sides of the playing field overall. For the new upcoming artists of that era, two new art styles and cultures being created as well.